my channel. My name is Kaylina and I am the Hex Witch, and today we are doing our February book reviews. So, let's go. Alright, so first of all, it is the 1st of March, so welcome to almost being spring. I am so very happy that the days are getting warmer and more of warmer, just nice days where I can just sit outside and read and be in the sunshine. So I've been very happy about that, and I definitely feel like I've felt that encouraging mental energy from that as well, which I need. And today, for some reason, I just feel like I have quite a bit of energy, which is great because most of the time that is not the case. So we are happy and energetic today, which is amazing. And I will take any days like this I can get. So today we were talking about reviews for February. And honestly, I had only put 5 books, I think, on my list, but I was able to get through 7, which bravo for me, because the beginning of the month was a little bit slow, and so I truly wasn't sure how many books I was even going to get through, but we ended up adding 2 more. So 7 seems to be my lucky number as far as how many books I can read in a month, or at least as of right now. Maybe someday I'll be able to get through more, but 7 seems to be a good number. So we are going to go through those right now. One of the books I read was the 3rd Harry Potter book, Prisoner of Azkaban. I got the full set, which surprisingly I haven't owned up to this point. My parents owned, so of course I read all the books from them, but never actually owned my own copies until 2 Christmases ago. So I've been kind of slowly making my way through all those books again because I read them when I was like high school. So it's been a little bit since I've read those. And the 3rd one actually is like one of my favorite ones. It's one of my favorite movies. I don't know why. I think I love Buckbeak, and it's just a cool movie and I like it. And even though it doesn't necessarily have the most like going on in a plot, it's just one of my favorites. So I rated that one like 4.5. Is it like the absolute best book I've ever read in my life? No, but I certainly do love it and I enjoy it, and I think J.K. Rowling is a great author. So, and I just love Harry Potter in general. Go Slytherins. Anyway, moving on. I'm gonna go kind of in the order of how I rated them, and so starting low and going high. So the one that is at my lowest is at a 2.5 is The Valiant. That's what this book looks like. And it's not like this was a bad book, but for what I was expecting, it just fell very, very short for me. It kind of makes it seem like it's going to be this big, epic, dramatic tale of like this girl who's stolen from her home and has to become a gladiator. And you would think with that kind of theme that, I mean, if anybody knows the history of the gladiators, it was very bloody. It was very, I mean, most of the time ended in death. And it was very much for show, but the dangers of death was very real. And so this book, like, the most that happens is just kind of when she's captured and taken from her home, she runs into a few little troubles here and there, and she's kind of a captive. But throughout this whole book, it's like she always has somebody that's kind of there looking out for her. Like, and you wouldn't think that'd be the case. So even like her captors, there's just one guy that's like overly nice to her. And I mean, you kind of find out why a little later on, but at the same time, it's like you just felt but there was no real danger that she was going to end up facing, because she always had somebody there to bail her out, whether it was this guy or, and even though, like, supposedly she's supposed to be arch nemesis with Caesar himself, she meets him and Caesar's really not even that bad of a guy. Like, he doesn't do anything, he's not mean, you know, he's just trying to rule his country. So I mean, what will you expect a ruler to do? And so she didn't even have really any bad moments with him either, and that was kind of the whole point of the story, was that her sister got killed by him, and yet throughout this whole process she really doesn't, I don't know, she just doesn't really run into any danger. And then even when she gets to fighting as a gladiator, she even says in the book that there wasn't any real danger, it was all for show. So it's like, but then at the same time, when they're practicing, she has one girl like lose her hand and another girl gets like stabbed and killed, but it's never like this like shocking moment. Like, even with the girl who lost her hand, the way she writes it and describes it, it's not even like you realize that she like completely lost her hand. Like, you just thought, oh, she dropped the sword and she got hurt, but then you finally realize that, oh, she goes and picks up the sword with the hand, and then you're like, oh, okay, she lost her hand. But there's just not enough like detail and goriness to really get that kind of feeling that you're kind of looking for in scenes like that. And it just, the fact is, like, she makes her protagonist, Fallon, almost kind of just untouchable. And I don't like when authors do that, because if there's no danger to your protagonist, it makes for just kind of a boring story. Because if things are happening to other people around, okay, sure, whatever, but you want a certain amount of things to happen to your protagonist, bad things too. You know, it's not a good book and it's not overly entertaining if your main character never gets scathed, and she pretty much never gets hurt. Like, and they even talk about how she, up until she got kidnapped, had never actually fought somebody like in real life, but yet she's done all this training and stuff. So yes, while she would be a good fighter naturally, since she's trained all these years for that position, still fighting just a dummy versus fighting a real person is naturally going to be very different. And so I kind of was hoping to see some struggle with that, realizing that, oh, I'm not as invincible as I, you know, maybe thought I was. And you just didn't get any of that either. And so she just never really had anything bad happen to her. Not really, not in the big scope of things. And so I don't know. And then, like, in the very beginning of the story, she's wanting to get married to this one guy, and then he ends up dying. Spoiler alert. He dies. But then when she gets to where she's going, Rome, and to be a gladiator, she meets this other guy, and she, like, pretty much falls in love with him pretty much right away. Like, even though she's still sad about this other guy, it's like she moves on very quickly. So it's like, well, that just doesn't feel overly realistic either. It's like, did you even actually care for this other guy? Because it sure doesn't seem like it when you're already getting very close and smoochy with this other person. So there's, I believe, 2 other books in this series, and this one has stopped me from reading any of the other ones, just because I was just expecting so much more with the theme being the way it was. I mean, I just expected a lot more. So that's why it got a 2.5 rating. I just wasn't overly impressed with it. And for me, I like high thriller action books, if that is what it's supposed to be. You know, if it's supposed to be more of a love story or whatever, then I expect it to be that. But this is literally about gladiators, so it should have been very almost gory, violent, and bloody. You know, that's what I expected, and I did not get any of that. So, moving on though. I am going to do the Book of Ho'oponopono, this book. And I'm so sorry. I'm butchering the pronunciation of this, and I know I'm doing that, and I'm very sorry, but sometimes my speech just does not work the way it's supposed to. So, and then apologies again for doing another crappy video on my computer because I still haven't figured out the camera issue yet. So, there's that as well. So this book is all about the Hawaiian practice of forgiveness and healing, which honestly there was quite a lot of, as you can see from the tabbies, there was a lot of food for thought in this book, which I liked. There is probably about 70% that I agreed with and 30% that I didn't totally agree with, and which I found kind of surprising because most of these healing books, I mean, I agree with a lot of what is said. Overall, I gave this a 3 out of 5, just because of the amount of things that I didn't agree with the things that I did agree with. And I love the fact that, yeah, it's all about compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. And it's about letting go of fear. And it's based on a phrase of, I'm sorry, forgive me, thank you, I love you. And maybe the world really is just that simple. But this book kind of made it seem like this one phrase could literally solve all of your problems. Like any situation that you find yourself in, this phrase is going to fix it. And, you know, maybe call me a pessimist, but I just don't feel like it's that simple, especially in the world we live in today, you know? Like, I wish it was that simple, and I wish just saying that phrase, and if everybody lived by it, yeah, maybe things would be more simple, but I think things are just a little bit more complicated. And, you know, yeah, I just think there's a little bit more to life than just that. The saying comes from Huna, which is a spiritual shamanism that is done in Hawaii. So I think that is really cool. And I actually read this book. Me and my grandma have this like book club that we do together now. And we just started it fairly recently. But this was a book that one of the books she had chosen because she's read it already in the past and she found it kind of interesting. So I was like, sure, why not? I love learning about different cultures, especially healing in other cultures, because I feel like they're just, like I've said before many times, they're so much more advanced than the Western culture. So anytime I can get my hands on just more ways of healing naturally, I'm all for it. So overall, this phrase or this custom is meant to make right, establish harmony, correct what is wrong, and restore things to order. All great things. And so a lot of times this was done within the culture, family, whatever. Anytime somebody felt wronged, they would come together and they would actually like listen to everybody and not judge, and then try to sort things out. Which, yes, if more people did that, 100% the world would be a better place, because so often we just get so set in our mindsets that we are right and everyone else is wrong. And so to be able to like put down your ego for a minute and actually truly listen to someone else's point of view, even if you don't agree with it, just the respect of giving somebody that time to try to explain themselves, I think is a great way of thinking. And I wish more people would do that and that it was that simple and that it worked like that. But unfortunately, us as humans, we tend to be a little bit flawed. And so it doesn't usually go as smoothly as that. Another thing it talked a lot about is that we have memories, and not in the sense of, oh, I remember all these things and like that kind of memory. I mean, kind of, but kind of not. So like these memories are supposedly things that are like weighing us down in our life. So, and all these memories create like a veil that kind of covers us up from reality. And by living out our lives, and I say lives because I do believe that we get the chance to live many lives if we so choose, we are supposed to be working on letting these memories go so that the veil falls away and we can actually see life for what it is, see each other for who we are, and we don't have the illusions that are put up by these memories. So I did find that very interesting. And like I said, this book actually did have a lot like more mind fucking than I even like anticipated, because it even like goes into quantum physics, and I'll mention that a little bit here in a minute. But just some of the concepts were like really out there, and it's not that I don't believe them, it's just obviously quantum physics is a very complex subject, and my little pea brain can only, comprehend a fraction, not even a fraction of that. So yeah, but I digress. Another thing that they talk about in this book is the concept that we, as ourselves, create everything. Like everything in our life, we create. And then you have everybody else creating their own reality, which is, again, mind-blowing. And so with this being said, it's also said that we are in control of everything, which is funny because in some cultures, it's all about letting go of control. And this one is very much, no, you have the power to control your own reality. And the minute you give that reality to someone else, or blame someone else for a situation, or say, oh, this person has this power over me, then you're letting go of that power yourself and giving it to someone else. So with the concept of realizing that we are in charge of our own life, our own destiny, that means that we can change our path at any time, which I liked, because as a control freak myself, I like to know that there are some things that I can be in control of. Now, granted, I can't control everything. I can't control other people. I can only control myself and how I view the world. But that's pretty powerful to know that, no, I do have my own power to be able to say yes and no to certain things. And no one can take that away from you. So I love that. I think that's great. So something else that I thought was very interesting was, and growing up and going to Catholic school, this was always a big question for me, was why is like disaster and sadness and bad things, why are they allowed to happen? And so in this book, it's described that natural disaster happens when humans are out of balance with each other. So when us as humans are in turmoil with each other, the universe reacts to that, because whatever energy we put out is what we're getting back. And so when our world, as we live in today, is kind of a mess a lot of the time, not to be glass half empty, but just to be a realist, there's lots of things that need fixing. The world reacts to that. And so that's how you get the natural disasters, the sickness, because the world is reacting to our energies that we are putting out. And so if it's tilted too far over to a negative side, that's why we're seeing all these things happen. Which is an interesting point of view, because then it takes God out of the equation, of where most of the time people love to blame God for every bad thing that happens. Why does he allow this to happen? But really, God is outside of us. Like, we are kind of in this time, so to speak, even though in this book it also talks about how time is just an illusion, and so we just are. But again, I'm digressing. So anyway, yeah, a bunch on the quantum physics, and that we are each living our own made reality, and you attract what you are. And so like I said, putting that negativity out into the world, that is what you're going to get back, because the world can't distinguish, oh, well, she's having negativity, but we need to give her positiveness. No, you reflect It's like a mirror. You're reflecting how you're feeling. And so I do kind of agree with that. You know, it does make sense. It talks about generational issues and how the past 7 generations can be affecting our life today. And I find this interesting that it talks about the generation stuff in this book, because it also talks about it in the Archaic Records book as well that I read. So, yeah. Another interesting thing was the power of thought and how it can literally change the human biology. So just by thinking positively, it could change the way our organs function. And the power of prayer alone could change like outcomes of things happening. And these are like actually scientifically things that have been proven, which is amazing to me, that just literally mind over matter is such a true thing, and it's fascinating. There's a lot of stuff about the brain and how we perceive reality, and there is an interesting fact that our brains can't actually distinguish between what's reality and what's like an illusion. So, which brings the question of, what if this is all just an illusion? If we can't tell the difference between reality and illusion, it could all just be an illusion, which my mind's on a carousel going round and round and round thinking about that, because it's a very deep level thinking, and I love it, but at the same time, my mind just feels like strained and about to explode. There's a really cool quote on page 89, if I can get to it, that I really liked. So it says, practice wanting for others what you want for yourself by being Christ-like rather than a Christian, Muhammad-like rather than a Muslim, and Buddha-like rather than a Buddhist. And this was by Wayne Dyer from The Power of Intention. And I absolutely love this quote, because I feel like as people, we get so caught up in the religious aspect of it. We have to have a certain name for it. We have to follow these certain rules. And at the end of the day, we're all just trying to connect to the bigger source, the bigger power at being. And none of us have for sure proof of what is right and what is wrong. And I like to think that God knows that we're all such unique and different people, that we come to Him in different ways. So He reaches out to us in different ways. And that's why I don't get why we get so caught up of, no, we have to call it being Catholic. We have to call it being Buddhist. We have to call it, being Hindu. It's like, however you connect with God, why can't that just be good enough for everybody? Why does it have to be, no, you have to see it my point of view. And you're going to hell if you don't believe a certain way. I just don't believe that. You can't tell me all these beautiful, amazing cultures are going to hell just because you don't believe a certain way. Like, as long as you're living in peace, harmony, love, and you're trying to become a better person, and you're trying to evolve yourself and trying to pull out that divineness in you, we're all connected to God in a certain way. So why can't, like I said, why can't that just be good enough? And so that's why I grew up Christian. And yes, there's a side of me that still associates with that, but there's a bigger side of me that just kind of came to the conclusion that wasn't good enough for me. There was more out there that I wasn't understanding. And I wasn't going to learn about it just by being Christian. I had to become more spiritual. And so that's the journey I'm on now. And that's why I love reading these books about just other cultures and realizing everyone has a beautiful different way of connecting with God. And I don't think one way is wrong or one way is right. I think it just is. And so I really like that quote, is just be a good person, be loving, be caring, evolve. Don't call it a certain thing, because then we get stuck in a hole and we can't embrace other people. So I thought that was really interesting. And then there was another quote on page 120 of this book, and it said, "You know what you need. You need to live in abundance, not resolve your money problems. You need to be healed, not find the miracle cure to this disease. You need to share your life with your kindred soul, not live with a creature of style. You need work that matches your skills, not this job that you saw in the class fields. Send out a positive request and visualize the film of your dream, realized successfully, while cleaning away your fears. As the days flow past, let life handle it. Everything will come at the right time is the best possible way for you." And I like that as well, because it's like, okay, yeah, yes, I have certain control over certain things. You know, if I'm worried about, getting to work late, I can leave 15 minutes early to avoid that. And that's a very simplified example, but it's true, or if I'm unhappy in my job, I can always quit and look for a new job. I'm never stuck. I'm never stuck in just one place. And I think that's beautiful. And so by finding that balance of control, but at the same time knowing that the universe has a plan for you, and knowing that ultimately if you just relax and let things go, things are going to work out, I think there's real peace in that. And I think ultimately a lot of the times that's what we're looking for. We're needing some kind of peace in our life. So I really like that. There was one part that I just did not agree with, and it was talking about how you're decided to go a different route home and you're walking, and all of a sudden this thief jumps out, pretty much mugs you, steals your jewelry, steals your purse, and runs away. And then it turns and says you can use the phrase, "I'm sorry, forgive me, sorry for choosing the wrong way home, forgive me for wearing jewelry that is going to maybe make me more desirable to steal from. Thank you for this lesson learned," and give yourself self-love after that. And that that didn't sit well with me, because that's like saying, oh, I can't carry just a basic handbag to keep my possessions in, because that may attract somebody to do a bad thing and steal from me. Like, I'm sorry, how is that my fault that that person decided to do that bad thing? So I'm just like, and then there was conflicting, because it was like, oh, once you say this word, then you can just let it go. But then it's like, oh, well, no, you still need to go to the police and report it so that that person can learn their lesson. But it's like, well, what would be the point if I've already forgiven myself and them for what they did? So there was some conflicting feelings regarding that, because, and then there's also saying that everybody is like a reflection of you. So anybody you come in contact with, even if it's a person that you dislike or you don't agree with, or that you just don't get along with, or that is kind of mean to you, there are all a reflection of you somehow. And while, yes, I could see that to a certain extent, there is a little bit of that I don't believe, just because if you've been perfectly decent to somebody and they're still just nasty to you for no apparent reason whatsoever, then that's on them. That's not a reflection of you. And so, and I'm not about one to blame other people or always put the blame on someone else. Yes, sometimes you need to look in the mirror and realize, no, this was me. This is on me. I did something wrong. I need to atone for that. Whatever. I need to apologize. Great. But if you're legitimately not doing anything, then that nasty behavior is on that person, and that is not a reflection upon you. So that's my personal opinion. Take it for what it's worth. If you believe something else, great. You don't have to agree on everything. Perfectly fine. So, yeah, that is that book. I'm going to pause this for just a second just to make sure that this is getting everything, because I have no idea how long iMovie allows you to film for. So I will be right back. Okay, next up on my list at a 3 rating is the book Unbirthday, and I do not have the cover on this one, so it just looks like a black book right now, but there's that, I guess. And this one was by Liz Broswell, and you know, 3 ratings I don't think are bad. They're not bad at all. It's just like my 5s and even my 4s, 3s and 4s are pretty much kind of like that average range. 5, you have to be like absolutely exceptional to get that rating, and then obviously anything below a 3 is, well, it wasn't my favorite. It wasn't bad enough to put down and like not read, but for me personally, it was not my favorite. Now, that doesn't mean someone else might not pick it up and be like, ooh, this is a really good book and I enjoy it. So take my ratings with a grain of salt, because if you like that kind of book, you may really enjoy it. So anyway, Unbirthday. So this one is a whole series of books that I was given to me for Christmas from my mom, and I've already rated the other 2 ones that I have read, or no, 1 that I've read? 1? I think, no, she gave me 4. I've read this one and Mirror Mirror. So this is the second one that I've read. Sorry. And I liked this one, but I can tell the author was doing certain things to like purposely almost kind of frustrate you in a way. And I think that was very purposeful. And I don't mean that like in a bad way. I mean that as like it was a very intentional thing. And the reason I say that is because it's Alice in Wonderland. And so if anybody is familiar with Alice in Wonderland, you know things don't make sense in Wonderland. The creatures, the characters, they're very out there. They're nonsense. Nonsense is a huge theme in Alice in Wonderland. It's a world of nonsense. And you definitely got that in this book. Like, and you could even tell the frustration that Alice was having even with these characters. Like, as she's gotten older, all of a sudden, these things not making sense, these people being crazy and kind of out of control and very scattered, bugged her because she's matured, she's gotten older, she lives in the real world, so to speak. And so you definitely get the frustration, and the author does a good job of making you feel frustrated as well, because some of these conversations, like, it just feels like you're spinning the wheels, like you're just going around and around and around with these characters, and they just like, they don't get it. And it's like, and that's 100% what I'm sure she was meaning to do, because it really brought home the frustration that Alice was feeling. But yeah, the characters, the Wonderland characters were even just kind of rude. And when you go back and think about the Disney version and even the newest version, the Tim Burton version, yeah, you realize how like rude the Wonderland people are. Like, the rules are just different, like, there. And really, really got that in this book. And there were times where I was just like, I can't stand these characters. I don't like them. I don't like them at all. And that was, I'm sure, the absolute purpose of it. But I was just like, geez, frustrating, getting annoyed with Alice, for sure. There was a huge theme of time in this book, and so I was somewhat right about almost kind of mixing the like newer Tim Burton movies with this kind of retelling. In a way, it was definitely done differently, but in a way it was kind of the same, similar at least. But the only thing that was kind of weird was that it was like saying that they were running out of time, like a lot. They were running out of time to like save Wonderland or whatever. But then they would jump back and forth from Alice being in Wonderland to the real world. But whenever she got kicked out of Wonderland and into the real world, it seemed like, oh, well, now we're just going to have a bunch of these things happen in the real world, and there's like no real rush to get back to Wonderland. Like, these characters are supposedly in peril, but yet we're just going to kind of take our long, dear time getting back there. And because we need to tell this half of the story. And so that was a little bit like there was no rush to get anywhere. And I don't know if that was purposeful or not, but I was like, okay, we're talking about how much trouble these characters are in, you know, and oh, well, we're just going to do this. We're going to take some more photography in our real world. We're going to talk to this cute guy. We're going to spend some time with our aunt and do more real world stuff. And then, oh, well, now we're going to try and get back to Wonderland. And that's not going to be successful for a while for whatever reason. And then we're finally going to get back there. And it seems like the world was just kind of waiting for her. So that I didn't totally get, but that might have been very purposeful. I don't know. Also, so I feel like with Alice in Wonderland, there is this really great opportunity to have things be a little bit more, I don't know if gothic's the right word, but a little bit darker toned, you know, a little bit creepier undertone. And she was trying to do that a little bit. Like, she described how the Hatter had lost an eye, and eyes actually were kind of a theme there as well, because I think one of the other characters was like blindfolded or potentially had lost her eyes as well. And there was definitely room for it to be very unsettling and unnerving, especially for me when it comes to eye stuff, because I get really cringy when eye stuff is involved, because that's a fear for me, is having like eye problems or losing an eye or something like that. That just, nope. I can do a lot of things, but eye stuff is not one of them. So, but even, it was just like, oh, well, we're just kind of going to mention it, but we're not actually going to give us any details or anything, which, I mean, I guess is fine if I don't like that kind of stuff, but there's definitely more room for really darker descriptions. And so, especially since, yeah, Alice in Wonderland can be so just out there, dark, you know, a little bit creepy, just a lot of unknowns with Alice in Wonderland. So I feel like she could have done a little bit more of that, but since it is by Disney, they were maybe trying to keep it a little lighter hearted, like a little bit more of the original versus like a Tim Burton version. I don't know. The ending. So the ending, I'm not going to give spoilers, but it was a little bit frustrating because you read through this whole book and then it's like the ending was just like, okay, what was the point in reading all of this? Because I just felt like we kind of ended where we started. And I mean, the ending is actually, probably feels like I'm saying a lot of contradictions as I describe this book, because the ending was actually pretty perfect for Alice in Wonderland, and it literally just tied the whole frustrating aspect of Wonderland together at the end, and it made sense. But at the same time, I was just like, ugh, that was just kind of, I don't know, irritating. But of course, my favorite character in Alice in Wonderland is the Cheshire Cat, and so within this book, like, each of the Wonderland characters they have a character in the real world as well that they are, and so I absolutely love who the Cheshire Cat was, and honestly, like, I don't know if my brain just wasn't working the whole time I was reading this book, but it made absolute sense as to who he was in the real world, but I just didn't even like realize it pretty much until right when they were announcing it. But I was just like, oh, I love that. So I love the Cheshire Cat. He's the best. Sorry, this keeps going dim on me. Yeah. So I think that is all from that book. But yeah, I mean, I love retellings. And all the two of them have been pretty well done. And this next month, I'm going to be reading Go the Distance, I think, which is based on like Megara. And of course, I love Meg, and so I'm very much hoping that we get a lot of that snarky, sarcastic personality that we absolutely love from Meg, because she's a feisty one, and I love it. I'm down for it. So the next book on my list that I read was Secrets of Ayurveda, which is what this lovely book looks like, and I do really like this cover. It's just got nice tones to it. I gave this one a 3.5. I liked it a lot. I feel like this was a great like jumping off point for Ayurveda. I know just a very little bit about Ayurveda, but wanted to read even more, especially since I am kind of in the process of trying to figure out more healthy lifestyle for myself. And so I'm dipping my toe into a lot of different areas to hopefully learn some things. And I definitely do feel like I learned some new things in this book. I would say that if you are familiar with Ayurveda and you have a pretty good grasp and concept of this is maybe a good book just to have as like references, like an easy reference to go back and look at things if you forget. But if you're really knowledgeable in it, this is probably a beginner's book and probably not what you'd be looking for. I'm sure there's other books that are just incredibly in depth, because I do feel like Ayurveda has that possibility to be very complex, because this is like an overall like healing mindset practice, that it's not just, there's a lot of different aspects to it. It's got a good layout. It goes through each dosha pretty thoroughly. And this practice comes from India, it comes from Nepal and Sri Lanka. It's meant to help control emotional, physical, and mental health, which love that because it involves the whole person as a whole and not just one part. And Ayurveda literally translates to the science of life, which is pretty cool. There are 8 different branches within the Ayurveda study, which includes nutrition, psychology, herbalism, climatology, and most of the time gym therapy and astrology. So honestly, it would be really cool to take like a whole course on Ayurveda, because I mean there's a lot of interesting things in those that I would love to further understand, especially like nutrition, psychology, and herbalism. And even actually all of them sound interesting, especially climatology, understanding that the climate and where you live can really impact the person as a whole. Very interesting. I know some about gym therapy, but that's becoming a little bit less of a thing for me. I have certain gyms that I absolutely love, like Smoky Quartz. Honestly, kind of the basic ones that you can use for a lot of different things. Those are kind of my go-tos, just because I remember what they can be used for, and I don't have like a whole area full of crystals, especially when crystals, depending on where you get them from, there's a lot of controversy about, you know, the humanitarian side of things, as well as what it's doing to the environment and planet. So I try to kind of limit the crystal intake. When I first started, I tried to get every crystal I could get my hands on, but now I'm being a lot more restrictive and just trying to be a little bit more aware. So, but yeah, so it also talks about karma, and so obviously they are kind of big on the karma, and there's like 3 different kinds that are mentioned in here, and they talk about those. And really Ayurveda is kind of a lot about balance and balancing out the doshas. So you're usually a combination of either two, or maybe you're just one, but you really want to balance out all three of them within your system. And so by knowing which ones you are like most of, then that's how you learn how to balance out the rest of them. And there are certain like dietary habits, certain exercises, certain treatments that each dosha does better. So there's the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, there's literally in this book a page dedicated to the balancedness and unbalancedness of each dosha, and like what symptoms you would be experiencing when you're at your best and when you're at your worst. So that was interesting. There's a lot about the elements that go hand in hand with all this as well. They talk about different oils, herbs, treatments, massage and yoga are a big thing, which love that as well, being a massage therapist. It goes into a decent detail about diet for each, as well as like the 6 tastes. So, like what, because there's like sour, bitter, sweet, salty. I don't remember the other two. They're probably really obvious too. Anyway, there's 6 of them, and so depending on what your dosha is, depends on what kinds of food you should eat, even including the taste, as well as like if they're hot, warm, raw, steamed, all that good stuff. So it does have quite a bit of information on that as well as the different exercises that are good for each particular one. Goes over meditating and breathing, which is really important. So this book was really good. It's a good reference book for sure, and it does have quite a bit of information. I got it at Barnes & Noble, again, on the sale rack, because I love myself a good sale. But yeah, I would probably definitely love to learn more about Ayurveda. Now, obviously, one thing I will say about that is that I feel like that diet would be a little bit tricky to like stick with, just because as human beings, we naturally love variety in our diets and in our life. So just sticking to only certain foods would get really boring after a while. And so, and I mean, why, yes, you know, kaphas may need to stay away from sweets. To tell them to never have any sweets is probably not very realistic. Same with, you know, vatas. I feel like vatas are naturally drawn to more raw foods, salads and stuff, when they should be actually eating a little bit more stuff with oils and a little bit more fullness to them. But they're naturally attracted to more of the salads and raw stuff. So telling them to never have any of that is probably not realistic. So that's the only thing that I would say about that. But some people may be able to stick to it really, really well. And if you do and it works great for you, keep doing it. Keep doing it. The next one I want to talk about is the Akashic records. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not. I'm probably not. I really should just look up the pronunciation instead of saying things wrong, but haven't done that yet. And this is by Linda Howe, and I gave this a 3.5, and this was really interesting because I actually have a lot of interest in these records, because I feel like you can learn so much from them if you can tune in and figure out how to read them, which I have not attempted to read them yet, because I really just wanted to have a good foundation of what they were, how to read them, what kind of information you were going to get out of them, how best to access them, and just have a well-rounded knowledge of it first before I attempted to dive right in, because these records are kind of sacred in some ways, and you want to be in the right mindset. You want to be vibrating on the right level. And although they are accessible to everybody, if you're not in the right mindset, it could do more harm than good. So, but this book is really great about just going over kind of all the basics if you're just trying to learn about them, you know, how to access them, the right questions to ask. So there are different phrases and ways you should ask these questions instead of just yes or no answers, you know, ask why or how, or, you know, and don't ask like when. Don't have things revolve around time, because the records are outside of time, so they don't understand that concept. It talks about who you will encounter there. So like your guides, mentors, teachers, loved ones, spirits, angels. I don't know about spirits. More angels and saints. Sorry, angels and saints is what I meant. So how the information comes to you, how you receive it, and usually it's through like your clairsenses, and it's not generally very dramatic. It's usually pretty tame, and so, and you can also like talk to your past lives with like yourself in a past life, because again, with the quantum physics, like there's other versions of yourself out in the universe doing shit, and then there's you, or you know, your past lives are still like around and you can interact with them, which is again crazy. So yeah, one thing that I found really interesting about the records that I had no idea was that you can actually read like many things. So you don't just read people. You can read your pets, other animals. You can read like departments, like jobs. You can read monuments. You can read houses. Like you can read a specific company. You can read for other people with their permission. So there's like a lot of different things of like imprints that you can read, and I just found that really cool. Also, one way that you know for sure that you're getting the correct information is if you're having a positive, truthful experience. So everything in the archaic records are positive. It's love, it's healing. It's meant to make sure that you are evolving to your highest level. And so it is never going to be judgmental. It's never going to put you down. It's never going to be negative energy. So if it is, then you're not really in them, and you need to redo the prayers that they have in this book and try again. It gives a lot of tips for reading for others, as well as like very specific questions of what you can ask for different situations. So if you're having a love issue, if you're having a job issue, if you're whatever questions you have, they have very specific questions that you can follow and ask. It also talks about, like I mentioned, the ancestral patterns, and how like you yourself can actually heal generations before and in the future by solving certain lessons that you're meant to be learning down here, which I found interesting. So they also talk about different absolutes, and that like she knows for sure exist within the humans and the archaic records. There was one. Okay. So I am going to read a little section of this book because I absolutely love this, and I feel like it is very true, especially with the world we are living in today. So, on one hand, we are teetering on the edge of disaster. On the other, we are poised to launch into an age of possibilities beyond our wildest dreams. There is general agreement that our old ideas are no longer working, and that our entire planet is suffering from our limited sense of connection to Earth and our narrow sense of responsibility for its well-being, on a collision course with global disaster in every area: the economy, politics, healthcare, and the distribution of resources. We can no longer afford the luxury of our self-centeredness. We are face to face with our fears of standing up for ourselves and others in the presence of greed. And we are just beginning to get the idea that we do make a difference, and that no one else is going to rescue us from our mounting problems. It is occurring to us that we have a role to play in the well-being of our world. And then it says, the age of keeping our heads down and our mouths shut is over. The day of waiting for someone stronger, better, and smarter to come along and figure things out is over. And I love that. We each have a role to play. We each have a responsibility. And by just turning a blind eye, which we're all guilty of doing, it's just easier sometimes to go about our lives, or sometimes we're so overwhelmed anyway that we don't have any more room to help others or do anything for anybody else, or let alone the world. So, and there's a lot of the times where we just feel like we're one person and we can't change the whole world. But if everybody just does a little bit at a time, we can make a huge difference. And that quote really, out of the entire book, that's probably the one section that I really really hit home. And I was like, that's a quote worthy of like an epic movie speech, it's time to stand, it's time to rise, it's time to figure out these problems, and it's time to make changes where changes need to be made. And we can all do it. And, sometimes it's not going to be a popular decision. And sometimes that may involve bringing the higher powers down. And I'm not saying, let's be rebellious or whatever, but change is never going to happen if we all just sit in our bubbles, Like we've got to start speaking out and doing stuff, and we've got to start taking care of our world. As far as we know, we only get one, and there is proof that damage is being done. And at the end of the day, all these companies, they're after money, but money is going to destroy the world. And so we need to start making better changes and not always go for what's just convenient, because that's what we've been doing, and it's not working anymore. So I really did love this book. It was really good. I learned a lot out of it. Obviously, like I said, it's probably more of a beginner's guide, but I just had heard about the Akashic records, however you say it. But I really didn't, I knew of them and kind of what they were, but I didn't know a lot of detail about them. And so that book was really nicely laid out and just talked a lot about them. And so at some point I would love to give it a go and try and see if I can maybe learn some things about myself. But I still feel like I want to maybe get my vibrations up a little bit more, and we are getting there. But I also don't want to do it when I'm in this in-between state of, I'm starting to feel better, but there's still days where I feel like death. So I want to be at a good, steady pace before I start deep diving into those sacred records. The last book that I want to talk about is this little guy right here, which is Chinese astrology. I gave this a 4 out of 5, and honestly, not because it's like this huge book, because obviously, look, it's not a huge book. I got this at Barnes & Noble for a whole $5 on sale. But I love astrology, and like I said, I do love learning about other cultures. And so I wanted to see kind of how the Chinese astrology was to like our zodiac signs and that kind of stuff. And this book was really interesting. So it's like the perfect like pocket handbook, like beginner's guide, but gives you lots of information, and it's all laid out really, really nice. So, and it's a very quick read, but it has just all this really helpful information just like right here. So you can literally just flip through it and learn very easily the beginnings of it. Now, obviously, like all astrology, there's a lot of depth that goes into it. Astrology can be extremely complicated, and I'm sure this can be as well. Just from reading it, I could tell that there's probably lots more that you can put into this, but This was just meant to be like a beginner's starter's guide to help you kind of, you know, begin your journey of learning Chinese astrology. And what I found really awesome, which and not at all surprising, but this was very on point. Like it, so this just shows you that even though it's a different culture, it's so funny how these like interconnect and like they become very spot on for anybody. Like I'm the year of the pig, and I'm a wood pig, and so and it was very spot on to kind of who I am and, you know, some of those character traits. So I thought that was really interesting. And the compatibility of some of the animals to others, it talks about the animals a lot. It talks about the elements a lot because that goes into it. There's your signs, animal fortunes, the polarities, month signs, and the 4 pillars of destiny, which the pillars of destiny just touches on very briefly because you actually have to like maybe go on a website and put in information to be able to have that spit out. But I did get a little bit of at least information about it, and that seemed like that could go in pretty in depth. But yeah, even the compatibility of the signs and the month signs and the day and hour signs, so it gets very, very like specialized. And so I did really like this, and I really did like reading about all the personalities. And it's so funny because, like, for instance, you know, I know when my parents' birthdays are, but I don't always like remember what year they are. So, but like reading the different animals, I could almost be like, that's this person or that's this person. And then when I like look it up, I'm right. And it's funny because you can really like kind of tell just by reading the descriptions of what people are. And so it was a very interesting read, and at some point would probably love to read even more about it, but for now I will probably stop at this one. And since I'm still trying to learn about my own astrology and zodiac chart and all that, so, and of course all of it ties together, so I'll probably get back around to this again at some point. But that is all I have for today. Hopefully some of these books sounded interesting to you and you might give them a go. And other than that, leave a book emoji if you so feel like it, or leave a comment of a book that you are enjoying right now. And if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe, give me a comment. I don't know, whatever you feel like doing. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and I will see you next week for another video.